Now, the rest of the story. By now it was quite late at night, yet by candlelight the great Dr. Sylvius pressed forward in his quest. The key, he was certain, was a specific oil found in nature, an oil of Juniper communis, the juniper berry. Its diuretic properties were well known, but there were other properties, and if Dr. Sylvius could only unleash them, he could produce an incredible blood-cleansing agent, a medicine which might someday be ranked among the greatest discoveries of the 17th century. Well, Dr. Sylvius drove himself onward, searching for the proper catalyst through which juniper oil could realize its ultimate medicinal potential. And it ought to be mentioned, Dr. Sylvius was no alchemist. He was quite a modernist in his day, and ally of the most progressive atomists and physiologists and chemists. His real name was Francois de Laveau. He came from a well-to-do family. He studied in Dutch and German universities before establishing a medical practice in Amsterdam. By then, he'd already adopted the Latin version of his name, was calling himself Franciscus Sylvius. His reputation as a physician grew to heroic proportions. In 1658, the now renowned Dr. Sylvius was invited to join the faculty of the University of Leiden, and he was soon regarded among the most prestigious professors of medicine ever to teach there. And it was there, at Leiden, that the great Dr. Sylvius first experimented with the oil of the juniper berry. He was absolutely convinced that this oil, properly processed, would make an effective blood-purifying medicine. One day, Dr. Sylvius discovered the elusive process, and within months, his revolutionary medication was available at apothecaries far and wide. It was called simply Genievre, the French name for the juniper berry. The Dutch called it Genievre, as they do to this day. And in retrospect, we realize Genievre was practically the only original discovery that Dr. Sylvius ever made. Oh, he is still regarded among the most important physicians of his era. His research relating to the nature and functions of the various body fluids was and remains significant. Indeed, it's his name to which we refer in the Sylvian aqueduct and the Sylvian fissure. Yet for all of this significance, the fact remains, the medicinal concepts of the great Dr. Sylvius were almost exclusively derivative of the research of others, were mostly second-hand, except for this one medication, which the Dutch called Genievre. That was the one, the true, the original lasting achievement of Dr. Sylvius. Enormously popular from its inception, it remains so. Although, in the light of 20th century medical science, its medicinal value is questionable. Incidentally, the English eventually abbreviated the word Genievre. They called Dr. Sylvius's miracle medication what it is. Gin. G-I-N, gin. Now you know the rest of the story.
And now the rest of the story. Behind me is the St. George Spirits Gin Distillery in Alameda, California. As Mr. Harvey explained, gin is a shortened version of the Old English word Genievre, spelled G-E-N-E-V-E-R, which derived from the Dutch word Genievre, spelled with a J rather than a G. Genievre is considered the historical basis of gin and is one of the oldest known spirits typically distilled from rye or barley malt. Its key ingredient is juniper berry, which is a medicinal herb used since 1500 BC in ancient Egypt to cure stomach aches. The oldest known record of wine infused with juniper berries dates back to 1269, when Jacob van Merlant, a monk from Bruges, described using juniper berries in Der Naturen Blume, which translates to the flower of nature. In 1552, the physician Philippus Hermati mentioned something similar in his distilling book, In Kostelijk Distillerboek, but the name Genievre is not yet used. Sylvius, as Mr. Harvey explained, is often cited as the man who named Genievre, but some gin aficionados claim it was a Dutchman named Caspar Jans Koolhaas who used the name Genievre for the drink for the first time. Gin became popular in England following the accession of William of Orange in 1688. It was a time of political and religious conflict between Britain and her longtime rival, France. French brandy had been the drink of choice in England, but beginning in 1689, the British government passed a series of restrictions on the importation of brandy. Gin was popular among the aristocracy, politicians, and even Queen Anne liked a nip of gin. The government encouraged the production of English gin by reducing taxes on the distillation of spirits. There were no license requirements to make gin, so it was open to anyone. In the first half of the 18th century, the economy in England was good. The price of food had decreased in relation to income, and because of lax regulations on gin, the drink was cheap and readily available to all classes of people. Then gin became a problem. We now refer to this period as the gin craze. London was hit especially hard by the overconsumption of gin. Daniel Defoe, author of Robinson Crusoe, complained, "The distillers have found out a way to hit the palate of the poor by their new-fashioned compound waters called Genievre, so that the common people seem not to value the French brandy as usual, and even not to desire it." The Middlesex magistrates, Middlesex is a county in the southeastern England, the Middlesex magistrates argued that gin was the principal cause of all the vice and debauchery committed among the inferior sort of people. Now, the inferior sort of people they were talking about was the poor. How surprisingly, this infection has spread within these few years, the magistrates complained. It is scarce possible for persons in low life to go anywhere or to be anywhere without being drawn into taste, and by degrees to like and approve of this pernicious liquor. Between 1729 and 1751, Parliament passed 5 major acts in an attempt to control the consumption of gin. People drank a wide variety of alcoholic beverages, to be sure, but gin caused the greatest public concern. In 1751, English artist William Hogarth produced 2 prints entitled Beer Street and Gin Lane, which compared the positive merits of drinking beer on the left with the evils of consuming gin on the right. The inhabitants of Beer Street appear to be happy, healthy, and positive contributors to society. The inhabitants of Gin Lane, on the other hand, have seemingly destroyed themselves with their addiction to gin. The image depicts a malnourished man who is close to death, or maybe he's already died. A mother, her body covered with open wounds, is so drunk from gin that she doesn't notice her child is fallen. Another mother is forcing her baby to drink gin. A person so intoxicated by gin that she has to be pushed in a wheelbarrow because she can no longer walk is being served a drink of gin by a friend. A gin-drunk man walks down the street with a set of bellows on his head and is carrying a skewered child. Another woman who has died in the street due to overconsumption of gin is being lowered into a casket. Even though it was an exaggeration, it was a frightening scene. Following the Gin Act of 1751, the gin craze began to diminish, but not necessarily due to the new legislation. The economy began to suffer at the time. It was faltering. The price of grain began to increase following a series of poor harvests. There was a population growth which led to lowered wages and higher food prices. By 1757, the gin craze was practically over. Oh, people still drank gin, sure, but not anywhere near the levels they had done previously. Gin had a resurgence during the Victorian era. In the mid-1800s, Londoners consumed gin on a comparable level to the gin craze, but not on a per capita basis. Per person, Londoners drank less gin per year than they had done before, but the total consumption in gallon, or liters, was about the same. In 1829, Artist George Cruikshank's engraving of the Gin Shop portrays it as a terrifying place. Caskets feature prominently in the etching. Demons dance around the boiling cauldron, which produces a skeleton of steam. Similar to Hogarth's Gin Lane, people of all ages suffering from malnutrition await their nip of gin while standing in a large metal bear trap as death patiently looks on. The artist depicts gin as a drink that would lead to the workhouse, madhouse, jail, spelled G-A-O-L, or to the gibbet. A gibbet was a gallows-type structure from which the dead or dying bodies of criminals were hanged on public display. This is an engraving of the pirate Captain Kidd hanging in a gibbet. In its time, the image must have been terrifying. The favorite drink of Victorian author Charles Dickens, one of my favorite authors, was gin punch. The drinking of gin appeared in several of his works. In David Copperfield, the character of Mr. Micawber's troubles were quickly forgotten with a dose of gin punch. In Martin Chuzzlewit, Mrs. Gamp, a nurse, was an alcoholic who preferred gin. In A Tale of Two Cities, attorneys Stryver and Carton, known as the Lion and the Jackal, guzzled gin punch while working on a case. During the American Prohibition era, 1920 to 1933, bathtub, so nicknamed because its production was so simple that people could produce it at home, even in their bathtubs, was readily available in speakeasies. Since the turn of the 21st century, the popularity of gin has been rising with the many new brands entering the market. Today, gin is commonly consumed mixed with tonic water in a gin and tonic. Gin is also often used as a base spirit to produce flavored gin-based liqueurs. For example, sloe gin, that's S-L-O-E, sloe gin is made with gin and blackthorn fruits, or sloes. Have you ever tried it? What's your favorite gin drink? Do you like it straight or mixed with something? I'm Brad Dison. Thanks for watching. And now you know the rest of the story.